Okay, Masechet Sukkah, we're at the top of 10b, and we're going to do 10b and 11. We begin with a story. The Mishnah that we just studied talked about a sheet, that you cannot use a sheet for sechach, and you cannot have a sheet on top or under if it's there for protection from sun or from leaves. What's wrong with a sheet? It is a kli, it's a vessel. You can't use anything that's a vessel. The way the next Mishnah is going to say it is davar mekabel tum'ah. It's something that can receive tum'ah. It doesn't matter if it's actually tameh or not. It's in the category of something that can become tameh if it touches something tameh. What is that? Something that is man-made, made into a bowl, a shirt, a sheet, right? Anything like that, because it's processed, manufactured. The sukkah has to be made out of natural materials, which gets into halacha l'maaseh. Can you buy like a floor mat that is made out of reeds for as schach? There's the problem with it because it's made as a kli, right? A floor mat. So potentially that might not be good. So you have to get something that is not made for any specific usage. Otherwise, it's mekabel tumah. So now we begin with a story.
That's the issue with fruit also, that it's mekabel tumah.
Fruit is also mekabel tumah. That's correct. So you cannot use fruit. You can fruit is nice decoration, but if it's all made out of fruit, even though it grows from the ground and it's cut, right? Which that's the other criteria, but it is mekabel tumah. It's something. It's useful when it's wet. If it became wet, so you cannot use fruit that's right. So that would be the problem with the Samaritan Sukkah as well. Okay, so here we start with a story about a shirt. Minyamin Abdeh de Rav Asher. That's his name. The slave was Minyamin, the servant of Rav Asher. Itamishale ketonta b'maya. His shirt got wet. Ve'ishtatecha amtalalta. And he put it on top of the sukkah to dry in the sun. That's reasonable. Amar le Rav Asher dalye lemru ka mesakechi b'davar mekabel tum'ah. So Rav Asher, his master, said, take it away, so that people won't say that you are allowed to make schach with something that is mekabel tum'ah. I guess he was an Eved Kanaani or maybe Eved Ivri. He's Eved Ivri, probably. Anyway, he's Jewish, and he's required in Sukkah, and so he says, take it away, or maybe it's his Sukkah. It's actually Rav Asher's Sukkah. So if you have that shirt up there, people are going to walk by and say, oh, look, Rav Asher uses a shirt for sechach. I guess you're allowed to use vessels for sechach, and they'll get the wrong idea. So please take it down. So now the Gemara asks, well, hold on, everybody will see that it's wet, and they'll know it's up there to dry. No one will think that you're putting it up there as chach. So the answer to that is so Rav Asher answers the servant. I mean, once it gets dry, then it won't be wet anymore, and then it won't be evident that you only put it up there because of in order to dry, and people then will think that it is a problem. So therefore, take it down. Okay, so that's a good story, and this would be not a problem of deoraita, because I assume they're not actually sitting in it when it's there, but a problem of marit ayin, so people should not even think that it is a problem. Okay, now itemar noye sukkah muflagin mimena arba'a. This is a very important halacha l'maaseh. Decorations that are far from the sechach, 4 tefahim. In other words, they're hanging down low, 4 tefahim, about a foot, right? So sometimes your kids make, those lanterns out of paper and things like that, or maybe fruit gourds hanging down. So if they hangs down more than a foot below the bottom of the schach, that's the case we're talking about. Rav Nachman Amar Keshera. He says, okay, right? It doesn't matter. It's decoration, and all decorations are just considered part of the schach. You could sit under it. It's fine. Rav Huna pesula. They say no, it is no good. It becomes schach pasul. Right? Remember these names. This is Rav Chisda. He's the one that's machmir, and Rabbah bar Rav Huna. So according to that, you should not. And that is the halacha l'maaseh, is like them. If you have a decoration that is very close to it, or a light bulb, or things like that, if it's very close, within a foot of the sechach, then it's fine. It just combines with it, and you can't have most of the most, because then. But you can sit under that, right? But if it's hanging down further, it is chach pasul. It doesn't make the whole sukkah pasul. It's only a small portion. It's only a little bit, but you shouldn't sit directly under that item. Okay, good. Now we have a fantastic story. There's a lot going on in the story. It's very short. There's a lot of politics and interpersonal dynamics. So pay attention. Rav Chisda v'Rabbah bar Rav Huna. So these are the two sages that said pistula just before with regard to low-hanging fruit. Oh. Okay, I have a good title now.
Right.
They once went on Sukkot to visit the exilarch, the Resh Galuta. He's the head of the community in Bavel, very powerful person. He collects all the taxes from the whole Jewish community and is the liaison to the Persian government. So very important. He's Jewish, yes. Oftentimes he was a rabbi and learned. Other times there was some tension between the rabbis and him because he wasn't necessarily the most learned, and so there, you can imagine all different possibilities. So Agninhu Rav Nachman beSukkah shenoyeha muflagin mimena. Rav Nachman was in charge in the house of the Resh Galuta. Who's Rav Nachman? Yes, he's the one that said that low-hanging decorations are permitted. So now he has these guests coming over, and they're staying over in their visit to Resh Galuta, and he put them in a sukkah that had fruit hanging lower than 4 tefahim, which is not such a nice thing to do, right? I mean, he knows that they would have a problem with it, so why is he doing that? Ishtiku vela ameru le vela midi. The two guests, Rav Chisda and Rabbah, they were quiet. They didn't say anything. They don't want to complain because you don't want to start tension with the Resh Galuta, right? Oh, your sukkah is not good enough for me. You can understand why they would not want to raise trouble. So they slept in that sukkah and ate in that sukkah without saying anything, even though they thought it was a problem. Amar lehu hadur behu Rabbanan mishma'atayhu. So Rav Nachman now gives the dig, right? Oh, I guess you changed your mind. See, you're sitting and eating here and you're not complaining. Now he knows he put them into an uncomfortable situation because they really can't complain. The Resh Galuta will, he could take away their positions. He could do anything. So I guess you changed your mind. You agree with me now, right? They say, oh no, we are on a mission here. We're here on business, right? We're here as shaliach mitzvah. They came to collect money for a charity or whatever they're there for, and so therefore patur min sukkah. That's why we didn't complain. We could sleep outside. We could eat in the house. It really doesn't matter. We're not considering your sukkah to be a kosher sukkah. So it's a good dig back, right? That they didn't complain and they found a loophole by which they wouldn't have to agree with Rav Nachman's difficult position that he put them in. So you can sense the tension between Rav Nachman and Rav Chisda, right? This, I think, is somewhat unusual, especially in Bavel. Most other stories, I have a chapter in my dissertation book about this, of rabbis visiting each other in different cities. Usually, when a rabbi goes to another city, they're accommodating. The host, okay, what do you do in your place? Usually the visitor will accommodate, right, be gracious to the host. Oh, this is what you do in your place, even if they disagree. But you could sense here that there were, I think especially with this dig. Oh, I guess you changed your mind, right? That he was somehow doing it on purpose, like kind of forcing him to agree with. Rav Nachman was forcing them to agree with his own opinion, but they have a good comeback. Okay, fantastic story. Next, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Okay, I want to show you the outline of what we're going to be seeing next. This is. We're going to see topic 1 is going to be canopy beds in the sukkah, and later on we're going to talk about making it actually making the sukkah, and not that it's made on its own. So regarding the canopy beds in the sukkah, we're going to have 3 opinions. Two versions of what Shmuel said. We're going to see in Ika Da'amre. So it's actually good that we're learning 10b together with 11a because it all goes straight through. So Shmuel, number 1, says if it's a temporary canopy, and it's not a tent. So temporary canopy is not considered a tent if it's less than 10 tefahim. So we're talking about the canopy pad in the sukkah. So great, you're in the sukkah, but you can't make a tent in the sukkah, because if you're sitting in a tent in the sukkah, then it's pasul. You're not actually in the sukkah. So if it is a canopy bed and it's less than 10 tefahim, so it's just a short thing. So that's not considered a tent. That's going to be version number 1. Version number 2 of Shmuel's statement is going to be that a temporary canopy is not a tent if it has no flat roof, right? If it's just like this, it comes up like a tent or teepee, then it's okay. So that's the 2 different versions. And then we're going to end off with Rabbah bar Rav Huna, who actually includes both kulot. Temporary canopy is not considered a tent, even if it's higher than 10, or even if it has a flat roof. Right. So whereas the number 1 says it has to be less than 10 tefachim, but it can have a flat roof. Number 2 says it can have a flat roof, but it can be higher than 10. Right. And he says, no, it can have both. It's a temporary canopy, and therefore it's not considered an actual tent. Okay, so let's see this inside. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, mutar lishon bekila basukkah. Kila is some kind of netting you'd put on top of your bed. You're allowed to sleep in a bed like that. Even if it has a flat section, that's okay. But one condition has to be lower than 10. If it's higher than 10, then it's no good, no matter what. Okay, so that's his statement. So that's our condition. It has to be less than 10. Now we're going to challenge it from a couple of sources. Tashema hayashin b'kila b'sukkah lo yasa yedei chovato. Brata says exactly the opposite. That if you sit under netting, it's not okay. That's talking about netting that is higher than 10. Shmuel is talking about lower than 10. Very good. So this applies. Now a question from a Mishnah in Sukkah. Someone who sleeps under a bed. Why would you sleep under the bed, not on top of the bed? Probably for protection, whatever it is. I mean, if it's raining, you don't have to be there. But okay, you get some protection under the bed. No good, because the bed itself, the top of the bed, is a tent. So that's the question. But the beds, usually their beds were less than 10 tefachim. Our beds also, right? Less than 3 feet from the floor. So what's the problem? Shmuel said, no, that Mishnah, he already said that Mishnah must be talking about a bed that's higher. That the airspace under the bed is more than 10 tefachim, and that's why it's no good. But you're right, if it was lower, it'll be okay. That fits again with his thesis. Tashema, also in the Mishnah, says O sheperas al gabe kinofot pesula. If you put a canopy over a kinofot is a frame with 4 posts, and it says no good. So 4 posts, and right, this would seem to contradict Shmuel. Hatam nameh gibihi asara. Same answer. That's talking about 4 posts that are tall, that are 10 tefachim tall, and that's why it's no good. But if it was less, then it would be okay. V'hala katane hachi. But now we're going to quote a braita that comments on that Mishnah that we just mentioned. And in this braita, it's evident that you cannot be talking about posts that are more than 10 tefachim. Let's read the braita. The Tanya, naklitin shenaim kinofot arba'a. This is just a definition. Naklitin means something that has 2 posts. Here's a picture on the bottom of the page, right? Naklitin has 2 posts, and kinofot is something that has 4 posts. So the benefit of naklitin, it has no roof. Okay, so that's the definition of them. Now, peras al gabe kinofot pesula. If you put a sheet on top of 4 posts, then you sleep there, it's no good, right? It undoes. You're not in the schach anymore because you're in your own tent. Al gabe naklitin keshera. If you put it over 2 posts, it's okay because there's no roof.
Even if it's like netting, like I'm thinking like a mosquito netting versus a sheet.
Right. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because of lavud, as long as it doesn't have really big holes in it, right? That are more than 3 tefachim. Here's the key line. As long it's kasher, as long as those naklitin, that's the 2 posts, are not higher than the bed 10 tefachim, which means even the 2 posts have to be lower than 10 tefachim. Okay, now applying that condition to the other case, that means the 4 posts are pasul even if it's less than 10. Okay, so that is a question on Shmuel. Here, Shmuel, you were saying that as long as it's less than 10, it's considered it's not considered a tent. And here, from this baraita, it's evident that even if it's less than 10, if it's 2 posts, that's fine because there's no roof. But if it's 4 posts, less than 10, it's pasul. How are you going to answer that? His answer is Shana kinofot kinofot. This bed, this canopy bed, is a permanent bed. You leave it there all the time, and so therefore that's pasul. But when we were talking about this netting, that's a temporary thing. You put it on, you take it off, and that makes a difference. So therefore, according to him, if it's a permanent structure, even less than 10 is going to be a problem, but a temporary structure would be okay. And last question about Shmuel in this version. Remember the case of a double-decker sukkah? And that is permanent. You don't leave it there all year. It's permanent in the sense that it's not flimsy. It's you leave it for a few, for 7 days. It's not like this netting that you just take on and off. So that's considered permanent. And yet, Shmuel said, just like you make a kosher sukkah, so too the sukkah on top has to be 10 in order for the lower one to be no good. So that means, according to that the upper one is less than 10, even though it's a permanent structure, it's not considered a tent. Because, right, if it's less than 10, then the sukkah on the bottom is okay. And that contradicts what you just said, that if it's a permanent structure and it's less than 10, then it is a tent and it's no good. So this is how we're going to solve that. Amri hatam lemifsal sukkah ba'asara hacha leshaveye ohala besir ma'asara name have ohala. That over there you were trying to undo, to disqualify the lower sukkah. So to disqualify, then we're more lenient, and yes, you need a full 10. But here it's about making an ohel. It's the bed on the floor, and when does it become an ohel? If it's a permanent structure, then even less than 10. I think there's a significant difference between the two cases, which is that the one with the canopy has a sheet on it, which is totally pasul, right? And the sukkah on top of a sukkah has sachach on top. So when it's less than 10, I think you can add another, maybe this is what he means. When it's less than 10, that sachach is sachach kasher, and it's close to the other sachach. So you can kind of consider it all one. Only once it becomes 10 tefahim high, then it's its own entity, and then it makes the bottom one pasul, right? But the canopy bed made out of a sheet, right, is no good. And then if it's a permanent structure, and no matter how big it is, then that is going to be a tent. Okay, so all that is version number 1 of Shmuel, and now. Oh, no, not yet. We still have more. Okay. Amar Rav Tachlifa bar Avimi Amar Shmuel. Hayashen bekila arum. Mosi rosho chutz lakila vekore kiryat shema. Okay, this is now a tangent, the same case, but this now it's applying it to reading Kiryat Shema. When someone reads Kiryat Shema, their body, their privates have to be covered. It's not respectful otherwise. So if you're wearing clothing, that's fine. If you're in a bed without clothes on, then the bedding, right, the sheet, as long as the sheet is on top of your body and your head is sticking out, so it's in a separate area and it's covered, you can say Shema that way. That's fine. But it has to be something like that. It's not sufficient if let's say you're in a house without clothes on and you stick your head out the window. So your head is in a different domain. That's no good, right? That's still not enough of a separation. You actually have to be covered. So here we're going to apply that to this kila. You're in this kind of canopy bed and with this netting on top. It's not like a sheet that's touching you. It's a little bit above and your head is outside. Is that considered like bedding? And therefore you're covered, or is it like a house? Well, if it's an ohel, that's more like a house, and then sticking your head out is not sufficient. So let's see. Shmuel says, you can stick your head out and read Kiryat Shema. That means he's not considering it a tent. He's considering the netting like a bed sheet. So that fits with what he said before, that you are allowed to sleep in it as in a sukkah because it's not a tent. So this fits. Now we're going to challenge this statement of Shmuel. Okay, this baraita says the opposite. If you are living, if you're in this kila, in this bedding, without clothes on, it's not sufficient to stick your head out because it's like a tent. and you have to have clothes on. It's not enough to just stick your head out of a window. So same answer as we said before. If it's 10 or higher, then it's considered a tent. If it's lower, then it's considered like bedding. And you know what, this answer, we didn't just make it up on the fly. It really makes sense in the language of the Baraita. Continuation says this case of in this canopy bed is similar to standing in a house naked, that it's not sufficient to stick your head out the window and say Shema, because you can still, your privates are still uncovered. So you see that obviously we're talking about a kila, some kind of canopy that is in fact higher than 10 tefahim and is considered its own tent, and that is the reason. But if it's lower, then it's like a bed sheet. Shema mina. So we accept that answer. Okay, one more point about that. Ubayit nameh afapi she'en gavoa. Now we're on 11a. Asara kevan de kebia ohalahu de la gara mikinofet. By the way, a house, even if it's a very low house, less than 10 tefachim, it's still, because it's permanent, it is considered a tent, because it's not going to be worse than kinofot, the 4-post bed, that also, because it's permanent, it's less than 4. So the conclusion of this lishana is that anything that is less than 4, anything permanent is no good. But if it's not permanent and it's less than 4, less than 10, then it's if it's not permanent, less than 10, then it's considered not a tent, and you can, right, and anything higher, or if it's permanent, is no good. Okay, now Lishana Charina. This is now the second version of Shmuel. Amrila, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Mutar lishon b'kilat chatanim ba Sukkah, lefi she'en la gag, afapi shegeboha asara. So it's a leniency, but a little bit different. So this is called a kilat chatanim. They would make a canopy bed for a bride. Seems that, and this was a temporary structure, which was used for 7 days when they had their Sheva Berachot. And it looked like, there's two opinions, either Rashi says like this, like the 2-post bed. Another, that's Tosafot. Rashi says it looks like this. It's a bed, but it has many roofs, but each one comes to a point. So there's just a lot of points, but it's the same idea, same point, right? It doesn't have a flat section of the roof. So all this is permitted because there's no roof. There's no flat part of the roof. Even if it's higher than 10 tefachim. So this is the opposite of what we just said before, that the main thing you were looking for is no flat roof. That's okay. Higher than 10 is fine. Higher than 10 is fine, as long as there's no flat roof, right? The flatness of the roof is going to make it a problem, even if it's lower than 10. Now, we're going to ask a couple of questions on that. The same baraita that we said before, right? Sitting in the sukkah is no good, which means it is ohel. So that's talking about a kila that has a flat roof, and that's why it's a problem. Shmuel was not talking about that. Tashema naklitin. Here's the long baraita that we mentioned before. Kinofot arba'a. Naklitin shanaim, kinofot arba'a. Definition: naklitin means 2 posts, kinofot means 4 posts. Peras agabe kinofot pisula. If you put a sheet over the kinofot of 4 posts, it's no good. Abe naklitin over only 2 posts, kesherat. That's fine. As long as, in the case of naklitin, it's only good if it's lower than 10 tefachim. So it's got to be lower than 10 tefachim and have no roof. So that means if it's higher than 10, it's no good. Even though there's no roof. This is right. Even if it's just like this, even if it's just one comes to a point, because we're talking about the 2 posts. So it has no roof and it's no good. Even less than 10. This contradicts Shmuel. Shena naklitin, they can be same answer as before. No, naklitin are permanent. You leave it there all the time. So if it's permanent, then there's definitely no good, no matter what. Even if it's less than 10, and has no roof. Even if it has no roof and more than 10, if it's permanent, it's no good. Hold on, if it's permanent, then why don't we say it's like the kinofot that has 4? No, legabe kinofot la kebi'i, legabe kila kibi'i. So we're saying compared to this kila is an in-between. Compared to a kinofot with 4, it's less permanent than that. But compared to the 2 post, it's more permanent than that. Right? It's the kila of netting is between the 2 and the 4. So its law is between. Okay, so that's the second opinion of Shmuel. And now we have the third one, which is the most lenient. Darash Rabbah bar Rav Huna mutar lishon bekila af al pi sheyesh la gag af al pi shegeboha asara. You can go in this netting. It's a temporary type of structure, even if it has a flat section and it's higher than 10. So he takes the kulot of both lishonot of Shmuel. Keman ke'Rabbi Yehuda de'amar la'ate ohel aray umbatel ohel keba titnan amar Rabbi Yehuda nohagin hayinu lishon tachat hamita b'fnei hazikenim. And this opinion follows the Tana Rabbi Yehuda, who said that a temporary tent cannot come and invalidate a permanent structure. So, and his example is that they would lie down, they would sleep under the bed before the elders, and the elders didn't have a problem with it because the bed is a temporary structure, and going under the bed is not, because it's temporary, does not have the power to undo the Sukkah, which is a permanent structure. So to here, the temporary bedding, temporary netting that's on it is a temporary structure, and therefore, even if it's flat and is higher than 10, is because it's temporary, does not have the power to invalidate the Sukkah, which is a permanent structure. So that's his reasoning. Okay, good. So that's his. He follows him. Now the Gemara wonders, "Velema halacha ke'Rabbi Yehuda." How come it doesn't just say halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda? Why does it say Kiman ke'Rabbi Yehuda, who said that, and gives the principle la'ate ohel aray u'vatel ohel keba? Why does it have to give the principle? Just say it simply. Halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda says that. So we answer, "Iyamar halacha ke'Rabbi Yehuda hava amina hanemile mita delegaba asuya." Aval kila deletocha asuya emala kamashmalan. Tamad Rabbi Yehuda dela ate ohel aray batel ohel keba la shena mita la shena kila. So the reason that we specified the whole rule is because if we just said halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, he only gives one example of being under the bed. So I would have thought maybe his halacha only applies to a bed because a bed is made to be on top of it, all right, not under it. So therefore, you're using it in an unusual way, and that unusual way is not going to be considered a tent, right? Because no one thinks of the underside of a bed as a tent, and maybe that's why I said no, that's just temporary. It's not going to undo the one on top. But if it's talking about a netting, which is made to be under the netting, maybe he wouldn't apply that principle. That's why Rabbah. But Rav Huna expressed himself with the full formula to say, even in this case, he would apply that rule of Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so that is that Mishnah, and now we get to the next one, which is going to be really fascinating, comparing Sukkah to making sisit, which we did already before. We're going to see two opinions, that of Rav and one of Shmuel. And then we're going to see two challenges to Rav, and after that, they're serious challenges, but we're going to try to match up Rav and Shmuel to two Tannaim, because if we could do that, then that would actually save the challenges against Rav. Question?
Yeah, just to finalize. So, are we allowed to have netting on a bed in a sukkah or not?
Yes, well, halacha l'maaseh. Does it say the halacha l'maaseh on the bottom there? I don't think I know most people don't really do this. Here, bitul schach. I'll check it later.
Okay.
But it seems like it would be the last opinion that yes, if it's temporary structure, then it'll be permitted.
Right. Or you can call it a decoration. You can put a pretty thingy, call it a decoration.
Well, no, that's no good, because even the decoration has to be within a foot of the roof, and this bedding would be far away from the schach.
Ah, okay.
Right. Okay, Mishnah. Hidla aleha et hagefen v'et hadelat v'et hakisom v'sikech al gaba pesula. So if a trellis, these climbing plants, a grapevine, gourd, or ivy, these are all things that grow very long, and so they're easy. I mean, truth, it would be true for anything connected to the ground, but these are easy to use as chach, even while they're connected to the ground, and you put them on top. Then it is no good. That's chach is pasul. But if you put a lot of kosher sachach, more kosher sachach than these vines, then that's okay. Or if you cut it, that's also okay. Right? So that's a good way to fix it. Now, zeh kelal. כל שהוא מקבל טומאה ואין גידולו מן הארץ, אין מסככין בו, וכל דבר שאינו מקבל טומאה וגידולו מן הארץ, מסככין בו. So the two conditions are, if it is מקבל טומאה, if it's a vessel, doesn't matter if it's tahor, if it can become tameh, it's no good, or if it grows, or if it doesn't grow from the ground, you cannot use it. So either one of those. So rather, you need both of the following. It has to be something that is not a vessel. It's not made into something, and it has to be something that grows from the ground. So even if it grows from the ground, let's say it's wood, and you turn it into a ladder, and you put wooden ladders on the schach, no good, because ladders are a vessel and are mikabel tum'ah. Okay, we're going to focus a lot on this kitsasan. Can you put the ivy on and then cut it after? Right? So let's see. Yetev Rav Yosef kamed Rav Huna, ve'yetev ka'amad, o shechisasan keshera, ve'amad Rav sarich le'na'neya. So the problem is if you just put the ivy on and then cut it, so then you're violating a problem of the Torah says ta'aseh. Right? You have to make a sukkah actively, and it can't be lo min ha'asui. It can't be done retroactively on its own. The classic example of this is if you have a pile of hay, and you take a shovel and you dig out inside the pile of hay a square that you could go in, and so then right, you just go in there and you have the schach and you have the walls, but you never actually built the walls. And walls don't matter. You never actually put the schach on top. Instead, you dug out something under the schach. That is a problem because you never made the sukkah, right? It just ends up being made passively.
What about if you have like some people I see like they have like a gazebo and they have the permanent things, but then you put the
good.
schach.
So that's totally fine because the gazebo or just the gazebo is permanent, right? But the gazebo is only little; they're all small slats, so that's just holding up the schach. You are putting on the schach, and that's the vast majority of the space is the schach. So that's totally fine.
This is even according to Beit Hillel, who says you don't have to do Sukkah Lishma.
Yes, even though it doesn't not have to be lishma, you still have to make it. Right? Whatever you made an animal a tent, you have to make it. And it can't just be something that was just happened to arrive on its own. So Rav here says, Sarich le'na'neya. If you do that, if you put the ivy on and then you cut it, you have to go back up on the ladder and just push it around, right? Each of the vines, you have to push them around. That's a way of taking it off and putting it back on. You don't have to remove the whole thing. Just push it, and that is sufficient. And that would work. Let's say you had a permanent gazebo with slats. You could just push them around, and that would be making it. So that's what Rav says. Okay, do not remember this because we're going to now switch it. We're going to say the actual Shmuel says that, not Rav. Rav says the opposite. So Amar le Rav Huna, ha Shmuel amara. He says Shmuel said this. So so Rav Yosef said this to Rav Huna. Rav Huna says, no, you're wrong. Now Rav Yosef answers, Adzrinu Rav Yosef la'peva amar le atumi kamina lach de la amara Shmuel. Did I say Shmuel didn't say this? I just said Rav did say this. Doesn't mean that Shmuel didn't say this, right? Just because I quote something in one person's name doesn't mean that no one else ever said that, right? I'm just reporting one teacher. Okay. Rav Huna studied with both. Rav Huna studied with Rav, and then afterwards studied with Shmuel. He's the main tradent of both of them. So Amara Rav, Amara Shmuel. So Rav Yosef said they both said it, right? I didn't say anything wrong. I don't have to quote everybody. I quoted one person. Amar le Rav Huna, hachika min alach. Rav Huna says, when I challenged you, this is what I meant to say. The Shmuel Amara velo Rav. Only Shmuel said it. You quoted in the name of Rav, but Rav did not say it. The Rav Achshure Machshar. Rav would say it's fine if you put the ivy on top and then cut it. You don't have to do anything else. The cutting itself is an act of making it, right? You're making it by cutting it. You know, making it doesn't only mean placing it on top. And he's going to prove it from a story. This story is now with sisit. Sisit has the same law. It says ve'asu lahem sisit. Ve'asu lachem lahem sisit. You have to make sisit, and it can't be arrive just on its own. You have to actively make it. What kind of case would that be? If you, let's say, tie, you see this picture here where you tie it. I think there's a better picture. So let's say you take sisit. You need four strings, and you put them through the hole, and then you bend it in half, and that's how you get eight strings. So usually we take 4 separate strings. But what if you don't do that? You take one long string and you fold it over twice. And then you put that through the hole and you tie it, right? And now, but it's all connected one string. And then later you cut the edge, you cut the ends. Anyway, you have the picture here. So here you attach it.
It's really one continuous.
It's one continuous string, right? And you attach the whole thing and you tie it. And then later, the last thing is you cut the loop and then create 4 strings. That's no good because you didn't tie the sisit. When you were tying it, it was no good because it was one string. And so only when you cut it, then retroactively, oh, look, the ties are all there.
Right.
So that is, what do we do with that? Says when that happened, they went to Rav Chiya, and he said in the name of Rav that by cutting them, that's their preparation. That's what makes it kosher. So when it says Vasul Lahem Sisit, that means just cutting it. That's sufficient. Doesn't mean, yeah, even retroactively. It's not retroactively. It's that the tying isn't necessary. The cutting is itself making it, right? I made it by cutting it. I did the last thing, the last part. It doesn't have to be that the tying is done. So you see, according to Rav, the cutting can be the step that actually makes it kasher. Alma pesikatan zohi asiyatan, hachiname kesisatan zohi asiyatan. So just like cutting that loop makes the sisit, so too regarding sukkah. I take the ivy and I put it on the slach while it's connected to the ground, and then I take my shears and cut it. The act of cutting is the making of the sukkah. It's not like the case of the hay that I dug out the hay, because there I didn't do anything to the schach. I didn't touch the schach, right? But here I did. I cut it from the ground, and that made it kasher, right? So that's fine. So you see, now we prove that Rav is the one that is lenient, that says you can cut it. Shmuel is the one that says not enough just to cut it. I have to go back up on the ladder and move everything around. Now, Besava Shmuel lo amrinan pesikatan zoy asiyatan. Wait, does Shmuel is really stringent on this, and he says the cutting is not the making. V'hatane Shmuel mishum Rabbi Chiya. Rabbi Chiya was between the Tannaim and Amoraim. So Shmuel is the first generation. He's quoting Rabbi Chiya, who had many baraitot. Hitil lishne keranot bebat achat ve'achar kach pasak rashi chutin shalahen kesherin. Now he's talking about not tying it, but just placing the threads into the corners of the sisit. Let's say you take one really long thread and you put it in one corner and you put it in the second corner. So now you threaded 2 corners of the talit at the same time, and only later do you cut them. So he said, this is kesherin. That's okay. My love, shekosher v'achar kach posek. And shouldn't we assume we're talking about a case where you tie all the knots and then you cut it? And that would mean, according to Shmuel, the cutting is the making, right? And we answer, lo, sheposek v'achar kach kosher. No, he's talking about a case where you looped it, you threaded it, but then you cut it first. And then only after that did you tie it, right? So in that case, the only reason it's kasher is because you tied it after you cut it. But just the looping is not so important. So the looping can be done at the same time. Now, if that's the case, that he cut it first and then tied all the knots, all the the 4 knots and all that. So then Maile Memra, what is he? Then what's the chidush? Isn't that like he tied it after? Why do you have to say anything? Ma'odetema ba'ainan kanaf bishat petil beleka kamash malan. You might have thought that you need to have each corner separate, even for the threading, even for the looping, because it says, the pasuk says, right, you put it on the kanaf. Maybe each corner has to be done separately. So he's telling you, no, the threading of that hole is not important. You could do 2 together and then cut it afterwards. Okay, good. So Shmuel's fine. And now we're going to have 2 questions. I'm going to just go back to the chart, the outline here. We saw Rav and Shmuel. We're going to see 2 challenges to Rav, and we're going to really disprove Rav based on these 2 Tanaitic sources. But we're going to try to revive him by saying that there are other Tanaitic sources that can help him, because it's Machlokah between Rav and Shmuel matches up with these 2 Tannaim. We're going to end up rejecting that, saying not necessarily. They might be saying something completely. Both Tannaim might be agreeing with Rav. Both Tannaim can agree with Shmuel. Okay, so here's challenge 1 to Rav. Metibe tilaan velo pasak rashe chutin shelahen pesulin. If you attach the strings and you did not cut the loops, it's pasul, it's no good. So this is a challenge to Rav, because Rav says it's okay to cut them after. Ma'ilaf pesulin le'olam. This is pasul. Doesn't that mean permanently pasul? V'tiyuv Rav. And so that would be a problem for Rav, because Rav would say, just cut them and they'll be okay. But this here says pasul forever. Amalach Rav, my pesulin ashi pasku. No, Rav might just say they're pasul for now until you cut them. Don't leave them like that. They have to be 4 separate strings, but you can cut them and then they're fine. Okay, so that's possible. Now, Shmuel amar pesulin olam. Shmuel says, when the Braita says, it makes more sense to read it as pasul forever. V'chen amar levi pesulin olam. So that's the second vote, right? That is forever prohibited. V'chen amar Rav Matana amar Shmuel pesulin olam. Also, the Matana reported the name of Shmuel pesulin olam. So that's a third vote. It's not really a third vote, because it's also the name of Shmuel. So it's really just 2 traditions in the name of Shmuel, but now at least know for sure that he said that. And so you see, according to that, if you tie it while it's looped, there's no way to ever fix it. Even if you cut it, cutting is not making. But Rav can still interpret it otherwise. Another version of this conversation of Rav Matana's statement is that he didn't say it as a statement, but rather as a story. Amar Matana, b'didi hava obada. It happened to me. I made tzitzit and I forgot to cut it, and I tied it and then cut it after, then I brought it to him. He says there's no way to fix it without cutting it. Right? It says even if you cut it, it won't be good, but no good forever. So that is probably, in fact, a story originally, and then eventually they just transmitted it as a simple halacha, like we have in the first version. Okay, so that's question number 1. Question number 2, metibe telaan v'achar kach pasak rashe chotin shelahen pesulin. If you put the strings on and then cut the loops, it's no good. Ve'od tanya. Right, over here you see this is stronger than the previous barata, because it says here, even if you cut them, it's still pasul. So how's I'm going to get out of this one? There's actually no way. This is going to be the tiyuv ta. So that's question 1 from Sisit. Now finally, actually, we get the whole issue that we're talking about the whole time, that you have to make a sukkah, and it cannot be made on something on its own. And from here we learn that if you put all these ivies on it and then pesula, right, and cut it after, it's no good. So now what case is talking about? Okay, that second baraita doesn't say that you cut it. Just as you put ivy on it that's connected to the ground, it's pasul. So what kind of case are we talking about? If you didn't cut it, if you never cut it and it's still connected to the ground, then that's not a problem of ta'aseh v'lo ma'asui. It's a bigger problem that's connected to the ground. Ela b'shekhes must be talking about a case where you did cut it. V'katane pesula shema mina de lo amrinan kesisatan zo asiyatan v'tiyub ta'derav. Therefore, even if you did cut it, it's still no good, and that is a challenge to Rav. So Rav can answer the second question from Sukkah. Amar lecha Rav hacha maskinan teshalfinu shilufe v'la min kira asuya asiya didhu. Oh, we're talking about a case where he pulled the branches out of the ground instead of cutting them. So when you pull the branches out of the ground, they're still hanging, and it still looks like it's connected to the ground. Unlike when you cut it and then the rest of it falls down and the rest of it's hanging, and therefore this is really a madit ayin problem. That's what he would say. That in that case, you when you pulled it out of the ground. Technically, it's not connected to the ground, so he should be fine. But he still wants you to cut it nicely so it's clear.
This Sikech al Gaban, are we ignoring that, or doesn't that mean that he puts Sukkah on top of the lines?
V'sikech al gaban, he puts some, right, but maybe not enough.
Not a majority.
Right, not a majority. All right, well, it says pasul, so it has to be not a majority. Because even if you put some kosher schach, it's still no good. Right. So we solved the second question from Sukkah, but we never solved the question from the Braita of Sisit. So we say, Mikom makom telan achar כך, right. Mikom makom telan v'achar כך pasak kashya l'Rav. Nevertheless, the first Braita is still going to be a challenge to Rav. So kashya, you're right. This is a serious challenge. There's no way to reconcile Rav with that baraita. So we for sure have at least one Tana that says like Shmuel. But maybe it's actually a machloket. The same machloket between Rav and Shmuel matches up with the machloket between two Tannaim. So let's see, what is the machloket Tannaim? Avar veli katan pesula dibre Rabbi Shimon bar Yehosadak v'chachamim machshirin. Okay, we're talking about the hadasim. The hadasim have to have leaves on it, and I do have a picture. Give me 1 second. I just want to reintroduce the picture because I lost it. There you go. Here you go. So this is, if you have a hadasim, right, the leaves are good. But if you have a lot of berries, too many berries, then it's no good. Okay, so you got to pluck off the berries. So the way you want to do this is before the holiday, pluck off the berries. If you do it too late, it's a problem. So we're going to talk about eged, which we do today. We take all the lulav and all the branches, and we tie them together. Okay, that's important. You have to tie them together. And when you tie them together, they have to be 3 kosher species at the time that you're tying them together. So if you tie them together when it has a lot of berries on it, and then take the berries off after, you never tie them together. Okay, right. So that's the equivalent case that we're going to be talking about, that you have to make it, and this in this case is being made on its own, and we're going to compare this lulav with a sukkah. So now we're comparing 3 different things, so keep that in mind. Avar veli katan pasul. If you transgressed, because you can't do this on Yom Tov, you can't pull out the things, but let's say you did, you pulled off the berries on Yom Tov, the myrtle is pasul. Dibre Rabbi Shimon bar Yehosadak. Hachamim machshirin. Hachamim say you shouldn't have done it that way, but if you did, the hadas will be okay. Now that's the machloket Tannaim. What's the reason behind it? Savruha tekule alma lulav sarich eged ve'alfinan lulav misuka tichtiv gabe suka taaseh ve'lo min ha'asui. Right now, let's assume that everyone agrees that you need to tie the 3 together. That itself is a discussion. Maybe you don't need to tie them together. But let's say you do need to tie them together. And we will derive lulav from sukkah. Only regarding sukkah does it say you have to make it. Regarding lulav doesn't say you have to make it. But we're going to compare the 2. We're going to see more comparisons between lulav and sukkah. But so just like sukkah you have to make it, so too lulav you have to make it actively. And it has to be in a tie. Therefore, they all have to be kosher at the time that you tie it. Because it says, so with that assumption, now we can build the argument that there's a machloket Tannaim parallel to Rav and Shmuel. The one who says it's permitted, that was Chachamim, right? Chachamim Machshirin. The man Machshir Sabar, Amrinan Gabe Sukkah, Kesisatan, Zoya Siatan. Since regarding a Sukkah, they agree with the Rav. They say just cutting it is the way that you make it kosher, is making it. Regarding lulav also, taking off the berries that is the preparation. So that's fine. You made it by taking off the berries. Uman de pasel sabar lo amrinan gabe sukkah kesisatan zohi asiyatan vegabe lulav name la amrinan lekitatan zohi asiyatan. And the one who says it's no good, that's Rabbi Shimon Bari Hosadak. He would say in both cases it's not good. Just like regarding a sukkah, cutting the ivy is not making the sukkah. So to here, pulling off the berries of the branch is not making it, and that's why it's not good. So there you go. We can match it up, and therefore Rav can say, I follow the other opinion and not this opinion. So that's a possible reading, but not a necessary reading. Lo dekula ama lo amdinan gabe sukkah kesisatan zohi asiyatan. Really, we can explain that all Tannaim agree with Shmuel that cutting is not making. What are they arguing about? Do you have to learn lulav from Sukkah? The one that says it's permitted, Chachamim, they would say lulav can be min ha'asui. We don't have to compare lulav to Sukkah. And so the lulav can be made on its own, and that's why it's okay. And the one, to be Shimon Ben Yosadak, who says it's no good, he says that we do make a comparison, and just like Sukkah has to be ta'aseh v'lo min ha'asui, so to lulav has to be ta'aseh v'lo min ha'asui. So really, everyone can agree with Shmuel. That's one. Or we can go the other way. Or maybe everybody agrees that you're going to learn lulav from Sukkah, and if you require tying them together, then yes, you're going to require making it actively. But one says you need to tie them together. The other says no, they can all be loose. You just hold them like the etzrog. We don't tie it together, so you can just hold them together. Right? There's another machloket about this, and that will match up. And one says lulav, whether it's tied together with the other branches or not, it's fine. It says that they do have to be all tied together. So my tamad Rabbi Yehuda, why does Rabbi Yehuda say they have to be tied together? Where do we get this from? We're going to learn it from Pesach, the Korban Pesach. You have to take ezov to sprinkle to put the blood on the doorpost. And so that has to be a group that's tied together of myrtle. And so too, just like there, you have to take it, tie it together. So too, you have to tie it together. That's really, really cool, actually, comparing Pesach to Sukkot. Rabbanan say, no, they're two different takings. They're not the same, and you don't compare them, and that's why you don't. So how do we apply this to here? Keman azlah hadetanya. Lulav mitzvah le'ogdo v'imlo agado kasher is the last paragraph. We're going to say this baraita. Who does it follow? Who of these two? Yeah, just by the way, right? So we just said that one says you have to tie it together. One says tie it together. One says you don't have to tie it together. So that would explain the reason why if you pull off the berries later, if you don't have to tie it together, then there's no problem of pulling off the berries, right? Because they don't have to be tied together anyway. So there's no concept of making it in the first place. Okay, so last point, this braita, who does it follow? Lulav misfal ogdo vimlo agado kasher. You have to tie it together, and if you didn't, it's okay. Well, which one is it? If it's a biyuda and it says b'di'avad, if you didn't tie them together, it's okay. The biyuda wouldn't agree with that. He would say, even b'di'avad, you have to tie them together. You learned it from the pasuk. It's a mitzvah deoraita. It's necessary. If you follow the banan, why would they say it's mitzvah to tie them together? The banan say you don't have to tie them together at all. They don't think it matters at all. So le'olam Rabbanan hi umishum shene'emar ze eli ve'anvehu hitna'eh lefanav b'mitzvot. Rabbanan are not learning it from the likicha, so therefore it's not a mitzvah deoraita compared to that you have to do it, but rather in general, whenever you do mitzvot, you should do it in a beautiful way. And if you're holding them each separately, each one's falling out, they're all crooked, it's not a nice way. You tie them together, make it beautiful, bring a nice case, and beautify Hashem with mitzvot. That is the best way to do a mitzvah. Therefore, it's a mitzvah. But if you didn't do it, it's still okay. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.